so I'll gavel in the meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council for Wednesday, April 7th. And we're getting started pretty much right on time at 6:31. As is our habit, we're doing it by video teleconference only. So I welcome everyone who's able to join us online on Zoom. And with that, I guess we'll call for a roll call.
Councilmember Candell?
I'm here.
Councilmember Paulson?
Here.
Councilmember Way?
Here.
Mayor Hara?
I'm here. And
Vice
yes, go ahead.
Vice Mayor Vice Mayor Hilmer is absent.
Yes. Okay, and with that, for those who wish, please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the United States
of the United States
of America
of America
and to the republic
and to the republic
for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation,
under
God, indivisible,
visible,
with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the public comment part of tonight's meeting. This is a time for members of the public to address the City Council concerning items that are not on the agenda or that are listed as part of the consent calendar. So if you wish to make a public comment tonight, please do so by stating your name. And if you wish, the city or your address, and we'll give you 3 minutes to provide your comments. Do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to speak, Allison?
We do, yes. And I'll also note the City Council received written public comment before the meeting, which is available on the online agenda packet. And our first public comment tonight will come from caller ending 1402.
Okay.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I'd like to alert the council to a recent circumstance that is important to Larkspur's sylvan appearance and also concerns an old promise that may require Larkspur's help to fulfill. 30 years ago, Larkspur citizens agreed to assess themselves for 15 years to buy the public open space on Little King Mountain and also a private open space easement and loop trail on Big King. Part of the incentive for that purchase was the promise that the development allowed at the top of Big King as part of the deal would not be visible from Larkspur. Kenfield had declined to participate, so all stakeholders agreed that the development would be on their side. The time is now coming, 30 years later, to make sure that promise is kept. The development entitlements for one large home on Big King have not been implemented for 30 years. In that time, the property passed through two owners, the late founder of Genentech and a member of the Metallica band. Now, however, the King Mountain property has been put up for public auction later this month, starting at $25 million. There's been coverage in the Chronicle and ads in the paper, and I'd be happy to provide copies or information as needed. The ads for the auction, however, show a large white hypothetical structure that seems very different from what Larkspur citizens and the county agreed to. It raises the possibility of a proposal much larger and more visible than what was envisioned originally. Larkspur was and remains a key player in this planning process because, aside from that it sponsored the assessment district, though the property is technically under county jurisdiction, the visibility is all from Larkspur. B, Larkspur citizens assess themselves for the purchase, and C, the preservation of a sylvan viewscape was promised to us. Thus far, the King Mountain Open Space Association, which spearheaded the original purchase and is still in force, it's chaired by David Moore, and Joan Lundstrom and I and others are members, are refreshing the county planners about the background. We will be sending Larkspur copies of a background letter that the county generated many, many years ago, and we are reaching out to the sellers for more information. At this point, we would ask that Larkspur be aware of this process and keep apprised of the situation. We'd be happy to help and to be prepared to participate in the planning process as necessary to ensure that the promises made so long ago are kept. And at this point, I'd be happy to answer questions or to provide any additional information or citations to information. There's excellent background in the Larkspur past and present too. And I think Joan Lundstrom may also wish to add some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Is Joan or anyone else in the queue?
Yes, our next comment will come from Joan Lundstrom.
Okay, welcome, Joan.
Okay, I just had to unmute. Okay, Joan Lundstrom, longtime resident, former mayor and board member of King Mountain Open Space. And I even dug out, I have a Camosa t-shirt that shows the outline of Little King and Big King. So as you look in back of Catherine Way, the smaller ridge is Little King and the larger ridge is Big King. So and it's directly west of, so think of Big King as about 800 feet elevation. It's directly west of downtown and behind the lovely pictures we have. But I'd like to just give you a little bit of history because how Little King was saved. A large apartment unit complex was proposed, similar to Skylark. So that got everybody's attention, plus some 22 homes. And then there was a potential in the planning stage of some a total of 516 units and offices. So needless to say, folks got together, and I think it's critically in Larkspur's history that our open space was preserved by grassroots effort to go and buy it. And the King Mountain was bought by, it was over 100 citizens energizing themselves, getting together. Then at the city council formed an assessment district. And these citizens organized themselves through the King Mountain Open Space Association and went often door to door to some over 2,450 property owners. So this is not only something that one sees, but this enormous effort, and that we taxed ourselves for it. So at this point, as James said, it's getting on the alert, getting on the screen, and tracking what the county will do. Because while this Big King is in Kentfield, it can only be reached through Kentfield. It's the impact of the visibility is from Larkspur. So this is it's our backdrop to our historic town, Old Town, and needs to get on everybody's radar screen. So we'll see what happens in the auction that's coming up in a couple of weeks, and follow it. To be continued. And the only way that Larkspur got its open space was through its grassroots efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thanks very much for that. That's very helpful. Any other members of the public who would like to speak?
Our next comment will come from Kevin Carroll.
Okay, Kevin.
Good evening. Interestingly enough, my mother, who lived in Corte Madera, both donated and volunteered with the King Mountain preservation, and used those contacts to help work on saving Ring Mountain in Corte Madera, where she lived. But she had a view directly of King Mountain and was involved in that. The reason I'm speaking tonight, though, is about the resolution on fair housing. The timing of this resolution is interesting.
Okay, Kevin, that's on the consent calendar.
You said at the beginning of this for matters of public comment and the consent calendar. When you introduced public comment.
Yes, I did, but it is on the consent calendar. So if you'd like to request that that matter be removed for comment and interaction with the council, because we can't do that if you do that simply in public comment.
I understand, and I would ask that you pull it from consent.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, anyone else from the public?
Yes, our next comment will come from Robin Mahler.
Good evening, Council. This is actually David Muller speaking tonight, but every time I call in, it says I'm Robin, my wife. I would like to make a brief comment regarding the King Mountain open space. As my long-term friends and colleagues have already noted, this is a matter, it's quite a big deal in Larkspur's history and represents a lot of work by community members. I think the key issue with this auction coming up is really about assuring that all of the requirements and protections that were part of the open space acquisition and are now in the form of deed restrictions on the privately owned parcel up at the top are implemented and followed. That's really the key thing, as some of the other speakers have talked to. Those were all intended to minimize the visual impacts of whatever would ultimately be built up there. So in anticipation of this, I have been in contact with several other folks. I've been in contact with Tom Lai, who's the interim director of Marin County Community Development Department, which includes planning, who was actually one of the key people in the history of this property, knows quite a bit about it. I've been in contact with Carl Summers of Open Space with Open Space Acquisition. I've been in contact with our supervisor, Katie Rice, and I've also been in contact with the Marin Open Space Trust. Most of these contacts were just to make sure that people knew what was going on, that they knew what the background was on this. I've provided them with a lot of the historical materials and made sure they had that available. And as the other speakers have commented on, to make sure that they're ready to act appropriately in the context of potentially a change of ownership of the property. The one other thing I want to pass along to you is that in the course of those conversations, I've been able to confirm that the vested permit, which has been noted in various publications about the property lately, is for development of what the former owner, Herb Boyer, proposed up there. We were quite familiar with that proposal, worked on it with the Boyer representatives, and that was a very earthy looking thing. Think stone, timbers, hunting lodge, natural colors, very low to the ground, low visibility. That is what the vested permit that's been referred to in the various ads for the property is referring to. It is not the glass and steel uber modern rendering that you may have seen in some of the ads advertised in the auction. So I've checked with the county on that. And if somebody wanted to come in and do something other than the approved Boyer proposal, they would have to go through, at the very least, a design review process to change that. So there would be a public process.
And
So
if we could wrap up the comment here, because
Yep,
we're
absolutely
going a little over long.
And just to summarize, I just wanted to let you know, the county is well aware of what's going on up there and is up to speed, and we'll all be working together. Thanks so much.
Good. Thank you for that comment. It's very helpful. Anyone else for the from the public who wishes to appear at this time?
Looking for any further raised hands from our audience members or any emailed public comment. And there's no further public comment.
Okay. In that case, we will conclude the public comment agenda item and move to presentations and proclamations. I see that there are none. Then we will therefore move to agenda item number 4, approval of the consent calendar. I heard a request from the public to pull one item, which I believe, well, I'll ask the public to repeat their request. Before we do that, is there any member of the council that would like to remove an item from the consent calendar for separate discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the same question from the public, and please be specific on which item you would like to have removed.
Kevin Carroll, it's your turn for comment.
I'm asking for the fair housing item to be removed and discussed.
Okay, so why don't we remove that as a matter of procedure? Dan, can we just pull that and approve the consent calendar?
Yes, you may.
So why don't we do that? We'll remove item 4.3 from the consent calendar and consider that in a more fulsome way at the conclusion of our consideration of the consent calendar. And with that adjustment, do I have a motion or any other comments?
I'll move the consent calendar with the
Okay.
exception of item 4.3.
4.3. Okay, so we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Gabe.
Okay. Do we need a roll call?
Councilmember Candell,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Way,
Yes.
Mayor Haroff.
Yes. So as a matter of procedure, I think it might be best if we allow the city manager and the city council members to provide their oral reports, and then we'll get to that removed item, if that's all right with everyone. So with that, sorry.
I'm sorry, you're going to put this on the business calendar? Is that what you're proposing,
Well,
Mayor?
would it be better to put it, or we can just plunge into it right now if that would make it more convenient.
It's your discretion, Mr. Mayor. But you should clarify for the record if you're moving it to the business calendar.
That was my intent, to move it to the business calendar.
Okay.
Especially since we don't have a public hearing tonight. So with that, we could have the city manager's oral report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I just wanted to announce 2 upcoming meetings. They're going to be at the end of this month. One is a Zoom public workshop that we'll be holding on the climate action plan. That will be on April 28th at 6 p.m. and we'll be posting all the details to our website. The second is on Tuesday, April 27. We're still working on the details. This is actually going to be an in-person workshop that we're going to hold in the public parking lot in downtown, and it's going to be an opportunity for folks to engage city staff about the parklets and the future of parklets in the downtown. Staff will be out there for about 4 hours to provide people with information and point them around downtown so they can walk and look at the existing parklets. And there are a couple more coming online right now. For folks who can't come to the in-person session, there will be a follow-up Zoom workshop before we bring the matter to the city council. And again, the details are to follow and will be posted to our website. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any oral reports or comments from members of the city council? And I see Mr. Paulson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I wanted to report back on meeting with Marin Park residents. So I met with them in March, and we will have another meeting April 15th. And the format is really for me to understand the issues and see what's changed since we had the ad hoc committee. It's also my understanding that the Marin Park owners have decided not to do the rent increase of $75, which was planned, I believe, for July. So there's no plans to increase at the moment. And I've been in touch with Christine as the park owner and trying to compile the information. We'll probably be in touch with the mayor just to see what next steps we should take. And other than that, the Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency is really gearing up. We know this is going to be a pretty dry season, so there's a lot happening, and I'll have a lot more to report next month. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else from the council who has a report?
Sure.
Catherine, go ahead.
Hi. Since last we met, I represent Larkspur on the Marin Mayors and Council Members Legislative Committee. Shannon O'Hare, our city manager, also helps with that committee. I think it's been really interesting this last couple of months that they've been able to organize this group to meet with our senator and our assembly person. So we've met with on the 30th with Senator Mike McGuire. He spoke to the group and answered questions about upcoming and pending legislation. We also had an opportunity to meet with Representative Huffman. I think it's really nice that they've been able to get this committee of mayors and council members that represent our 11 cities and towns to engage with our broader representatives. You'll hear more of that, obviously, from what we're seeing, some of these letters of support for specific bills that are coming through. Second, on the 1st of April, I represent us on the Community Development Block Grant program, and they did a funding cycle this year where we were able to allocate about $1.6 million in community development block grants to Marin nonprofits. Those lists of who received those items are on the website, but it was a real cross section of nonprofits from West Marin to Marin City. It was nice to see, and I'm very pleased we have a Larkspur representative resident who serves on that committee. We also allocated from the home grant program, which is to support low-income housing and other advocacy things for low-income housing, about $800,000. And this is all federal funds that we receive, the county receives. And then lastly, there was a fire on Elm Avenue on Monday, and I was out of town, but I did get a couple of alerts because I've signed up for Alert Marin, and I've signed up for Pulse Point and Everbridge, and everyone should sign up for those, and you can indicate your agency. So even though I was 500 miles away, I got a notification that there was a fire in my neighborhood. Very important emergency information for everyone. So alertmarin.org. That's all.
Okay, anything else? Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take a second just to talk a little bit about the Sir Francis Drake meeting that you and I were at.
Sure, good.
Probably you should talk on it as well, because I think me and you may have different perspectives on it. So I'll kind of give my take on it, and if it varies from yours, please feel free. So we have been discussing what's happening with the renaming of Sir Francis Drake. It went back to the individual jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction decided how they wanted to handle it. We said we were interested in either co-naming or kind of a historic name, so there would be dual naming. That seemed to carry the day, where it seemed to be kind of the middle ground. Not everyone is going to have to go back to their individual councils, because some of them, voted for a renaming. Some of them voted to do nothing. So it's in the process of trying to find cohesiveness throughout the county and see if we can achieve that. My impression was at the next point we were going to be discussing if we were going to have a historic name, what group did we want to honor? And I thought that was going to come back to the different councils and everyone would talk about it, because this started out as a Black Lives Matter movement, kind of transformed into a Miwok movement, and I thought there would be more discussion. But what actually happened is the county decided to take the lead on it and said that they were speaking with the Miwok and they were going to propose a name for the boulevard that honored the Miwok. And the cities could follow along if they want to, or they could not. So I was a little disappointed with that, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up. I would imagine that's the direction that the county is going to be going with this. And then we're going to be put in the position to follow along or not follow along. And we can, as a council, can choose, and as a city can choose to do whatever we want. We could honor Black Lives Matter and have a separate historic name than they do. Kind of defeats the purpose of trying to have a jurisdictional unity. But I think it feels like that's the position that we're going to be put in. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that I think that's coming down the pipeline. And Mr. Mayor, if you saw it differently, let me know.
Yeah, I guess I had a little bit of a different slant on the way the conversation. This is a meeting that Scott and I participated in last Wednesday that was kind of chaired by the supervisors, Rodino and Katie Rice, and involved us and other representatives from some of the other jurisdictions along the boulevard. There were a couple of things I think, at least for me, that came out of that conversation. One is that there is a desire, if possible, to have a single name for the road. And there are various reasons for that, not the least of which are some legal and cost considerations that would be involved with a dual naming strategy. And when I say a dual naming strategy, what I mean is an attempt to assign two official names to the boulevard, coextensive names that would stretch throughout the length or whatever jurisdictions would choose to adopt that. So I think the sense was that because of legal and cost impediments, that's not really a viable strategy. So then the question is, do we keep the name as it is, or do we change the name? And if we do one or the other of those things, do we also maybe encourage some kind of additional recognition along the roadway in terms of memorial signage or other markers to not only just reflect the historical values associated with the road, but also to recognize the presence and current engagement of Indigenous populations within our community. I think that's still likely to be on the table no matter what. But in terms of the name of the road itself, and again, this is a focus of the county, although I think there's some sentiment, I think, not maybe universal, that if the county adopts a particular strategy, that there will be incentives for individual jurisdictions to follow along, just because of the confusion that multiple naming of the street would entail. So then the question is, how do we proceed next in terms of evaluating what might be options for different names? And one of the things that came out, I think, in the conversation was there's been a reluctance for an important group on the Indigenous population side, which is the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, who have not actively participated in the conversation so far. It's not really clear to me why they have declined to do that. But the kind of takeaway at the end of the meeting that I had was a recognition by the county that it's important to address this issue with Great Rancheria more directly, and maybe set up a meeting with them to discuss and make clear that at least whatever decision we make is informed by their perspectives. So I haven't spoken with Katie or Dennis since the last Wednesday on whether a meeting along those lines has been set up, but my impression was that that was the desire to move forward with that contact, see what comes out of it, and then have our decision making be informed by the outcome of that conversation. So I don't know that we were saying completely different things, Scott, but that I had a different, at least emphasis in the conversation that I heard on Wednesday.
Yep, and just I agree with everything that you just said. It's 100% accurate. I think I was disappointed, because I was looking forward to a kind of a group decision, and we would come back to our city council and say, hey, we're going to honor some group with a historic designation. What group do you think we should honor? Let's get the community input. And it just feels like the county has decided that this is the way they're going without input from the individual jurisdictions. So I just wanted to let Gabe and Catherine know that it feels like that decision has been taken out of our hands if we want to have unity within the county. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that might be a little premature. I think there's still some additional conversations need to occur, and I'm committed to participating in them to the extent that I'm able, at least.
Do they have a timeline on this? Or will there be additional meetings this month?
There were no specific meetings. Like I said, the next step that I think that came out of the meeting last week was the need for the county, with support of others to the extent that they're willing, and I certainly am, to reach out to the Great Rancheria folks and set a meeting with them, or at least a conversation, to get their input before taking further action. So there are no additional specific meetings that are set until that process can be completed.
If I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
I think all the managers attended and listened to the meeting that the mayor and Councilmember Kendall attended. I left the meeting with the impression that that particular working group is effectively disbanded, because several of the towns were saying they have their instructions from their council, and
yes.
So I think any meetings that now take place are sort of independent of an organized effort among the 5 jurisdictions, which I think is one of the things Councilmember Kendall is getting across, is it's become a little more of a disjointed process at this point.
And I think that's a fair observation. I don't, the original intent, I think, of the working group was to play a leadership role in reaching a decision. And I think we're kind of beyond that at this point. But there are some additional steps that need to be taken, and one of those steps is reaching out to the Great Rancheria people. And then we'll see how things go from there. So that's kind of where it is, I think.
So let me just pose a question on this, which is, and I'm not sure, Dan, if this is to you or to Mr. Mayor, do we as a city at this point put something on our calendar to say, okay, this is what happened with the joint task force. Do we want to do a historic name, and how do we want to proceed? Or do we just want to put the brakes on this, wait and see what the county does? And then once they make a decision, we bring it back to our jurisdiction and say, hey, this is what the county's doing. Do we want to follow along?
Dan, if you want to go ahead and respond, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to be careful we're not drifting too far into making a decision. I think the council still effectively empowered Mayor Haroff and Councilmember Kendall, the 2 of you, to sort of make that general decision, because you were appointed as the subcommittee to go engage in this process. So I think the 2 of you could offline you could decide what sort of agenda item you might want to recommend we place on a future council agenda.
Yeah.
And then instruct me, and I'll have that done.
And that's a conversation that we can have. That we don't have to do that tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then the only last item that I want to point out is and Scott's been involved in this as well, is the Chamber of Commerce, which is doing better than I think any of us thought it would be doing at the end of or a year ago at least. New members have come in recently, and it's doing reasonably well. And in order to continue to promote the Chamber's efforts, I think it's next Tuesday, Dan, on the 13th. Dan and I will be participating in a meet Dan and Kevin meeting with the Chamber at 6 o'clock on Tuesday. I guess that'll be another Zoom meeting. And we will be meeting with members of the Chamber, trying to let folks know what's going on within the city, and respond to questions and comments, and see what how we can better work together going forward into the future. So, and that's the last item that I had on my list. Anything else from the council? Seeing none, that will, oops, and I lost my, just a minute, I lost my agenda item here. There we go. So that will take us to item number 7, public hearings. There was one item on here, which was an appeal of a planning commission decision to approve an application for design review and various other items, including demolition of an existing residence. at 80 Corte del Bayo. That appeal, we learned today, has now been withdrawn. So at this point, there will not be any hearing, and we will take the item off the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask if we skipped over the city manager's report?
No, we didn't.
We didn't. Okay.
Did we, Dan? Or is there something more you wanted to say?
No, I reported on the climate action plan meeting that's coming up and the parklet meeting that's coming up.
You're right. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. So is there anything else to be said about 7.1? I think it's kind of a simple matter. It's off the agenda. And that's about it. So with that, we'll close item number 7 and move to item number 8. We have one item listed on agenda item number 8. That's 8.1, which is an update on city activities and finances with regard to coronavirus. But we did pull earlier from the consent calendar item number 4.3, which concerns the adoption of a proclamation acknowledging April 2021 as Fair Housing Month. So let's have a hearing on that. City manager, can we have maybe a brief report from the city's perspective on that item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I have to first apologize to the council. This resolution, this proclamation, is such a perfunctory exercise for the staff that we've sort of abandoned our typical practice of writing a cover memo. So the proclamation that was on the consent calendar is something that's been given to the city with the request that the city council adopt it for years. It used to come from an entity called Fair Housing of Marin. They've rebranded themselves as Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California. They write it. The language in it is standard language that's approved by municipalities across the country to celebrate Fair Housing Month and the passage of fair housing laws. And it reads almost exactly the same in other states. It's tweaked a little bit for each state. And so we've typically just thrown it on the consent calendar, and then we've had the mayor sign the proclamation after the council approves it. I know some written comments came in requesting that you change the proclamation. I would suggest that the council, if that's its inclination, defer action and ask the authors of the proclamation if, one, that's welcome, and two, if that is appropriate given the specific laws that they're trying to celebrate. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just suggesting that I'm not in a position to inform you whether that's appropriate.
Fair enough. Any comments or questions from the council before we open it up to the public? Okay. With that, let's see if there is, Allison, anyone in the public who would like to comment on this item.
Yes, we'll have Kevin Carroll for public comment.
Good evening. And again, thank you. The timing of this resolution is interesting. All of you appear to be homeowners, and within 3 days by the 10th, the second installment of your property taxes are due, and you probably have made your monthly mortgage payment, the two biggest costs to owning your home. By law, the maximum your property tax can increase is 2% a year. If you have a standard fixed rate 30-year mortgage, you know your payment will not increase for the life of your loan. You're paying the same amount as your first payment and will pay the same for the life of your loan. My great-grandparents worked until the days they died. They literally both died on the job. And they had to, because home loans in those days were 3 to 5 years, interest only, and could be called by the bank if the bank had a liquidity problem, which was a pretty common occurrence before 1930. Because of programs created by the government after the Great Depression, 30-year mortgages and Social Security became law. Because of that, my grandparents were able to own a home and retire at the age of 65. My own parents were able to own a home in Corte Madera, but their retirement at 65 was threatened by the dramatic year-by-year increase in state property taxes. Fortunately for them, Proposition 13 limited increases to 2% a year and allowed them to retire on their Social Security and to stay in their home. When they later needed more assistance, the equity they'd built paid for their care at the Aldersley Retirement Community in San Rafael. Just as you have benefited, and all the other homeowners in Larkspur have benefited from government protections and programs, we're asking you to protect us, people who would qualify under current rent stabilization programs for mobile homeowners in all the other Marin County cities. Only one council member has actively participated in meeting with our tenants committee, and he's kept focusing on the park owners program that was specifically created by the Park Owners Association to thwart rent stabilization. The program is not enforceable by law, and its terms can be changed at the sole discretion of the owner and can be terminated at any time. While the proclamation honoring fair housing is a nice gesture on your part, action would be more meaningful. Please join the other Marin County cities in promoting fair housing by passing rent stabilization for mobile homeowners. As the attached chart shows in the minutes, at the current rate of increases, our homes will no longer be affordable. Councilmember Paulson mentioned the homeowner putting off the rent increase. She did not do that out of the generosity of her heart. She did it because if she'd imposed it, it would have made our 1 year rent increase 16%, which was 6% over the maximum allowable by state law during an emergency, and it would have been called rent gouging. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else from the public wish to offer a comment?
Looking for any further. Okay, I see we have a comment from caller ending in 1402.
Okay, can you please state your name for the record?
James Holmes, Larkspur. I concur with the previously made comments, and as I read various actions taken by various communities with regard to rent stabilization, I do wonder if it wouldn't be more appropriate for Larkspur to review those actions and consider taking some of them, especially in light of the fact that I know that the general plan, or at least in the proposed general plan, recognizes the mobile home parks as being a significant resource for low-income housing that should be preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Anyone else from the public, Allison?
I'm looking for any further raised hands in our audience or any emailed public comment, and there's no further public comment.
Okay, with that, let me bring it back to the council for comments and potential action. Scott Candell, please.
Thank you. And this is more of a question for Dan. Could you repeat or explain a little bit more your suggestion about how we handle this? Because I'm unclear about what we even legally can do with rent stabilization for a privately owned property that, you know, they bought the property. Would they be grandfathered in, and would it still affect them? I mean, it just seems like a very complicated issue. That
so under the Brown Act, we can't discuss rent stabilization during this item. It's not what's on the agenda. So if that's of interest to the council, then you should give me direction to agendize a discussion. The matter in front of the council is whether or not to direct the mayor to sign the fair housing proclamation. And so that's what the discussion should be about. You have another public comment asking you to amend the proclamation. And so my comments at the beginning were to tell you, if that is of interest to you, I would suggest you refer the proclamation back to fair housing and ask them if that is actually a welcome amendment that you want to make.
Okay, so are you suggesting not that we decide whether or not we want to amend it or not, but instead we send it back without a decision of whether we want to amend it?
No, I think if you want to send it back to them saying we're interested in making some amendments to the Fair Housing Proclamation, here's what we want to do. So they know what it is you want to change, and they can decide if that's consistent with both their standard language and the language that's generally adopted nationally.
Okay, and just my position is, I think I need more information on this. So however the council wishes to proceed, I would go along, but I would love to, and again, I think there's a bigger issue here that we need to talk about, that I am not in a position to even have an opinion, because I don't even know legally what we can or can't do. So as far as the letter goes, I will, I guess I would be in favor of not signing it yet, sending it back and getting a little bit more information or more opinions on it, if that was what the other council members wanted.
Any comments from the other council members? I have some. Mr. Paulson, you raised your hand first, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to finish off what Scott was requesting, I agree that what we pulled from the agenda should be addressed as an amendment to a proclamation, yes or no, with feedback from Fair Housing. On the broader issues, I just want to reiterate my activities and my report out that I have been meeting with the Marin Park group, and I was going to, we had the ad hoc committee in 2020, and we formally ended that. So I would just propose my next steps are to gather the information I have, because there is a good bit more to it than what Mr. Carroll said, and I'd like to bring that forth and probably start with the mayor, as we were in this together, and to keep with 2 people within the Brown Act, and possibly we can make a determination from there where to go.
Okay. Councilmember Way, I think you had your hand up.
So it sounds like the letter is pretty much a boilerplate letter that goes around every year in a commemorative letter. I think we have to bifurcate this specific letter from the issue that Mr. Carroll brought up, which is a more specific issue to their housing arrangement in the mobile home park. So I'd be fine with sending the letter as written. I think it's taken a lot of our staff time to do it, and whether we want our staff to add an additional word or two with the permission of the housing authority. I don't know if that's going to make the difference for what our residents are asking, which is the conversation that Councilmember Paulson can put forward. So I'm not sure it's worth our, Dan, our DSR.
I just don't want there to be confusion.
Right.
Your staff did not write this. We had nothing to do with it. Every year, an entity sends it to us, as they send it to every city in Marin, and says, would you please adopt this celebrating Fair Housing Month? And they write it. It's language that other entities all across the country ask municipalities near them to pass. It's just a feel-good thing, and I have no objection, and I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other about changing it. It's just, it's not ours. It's something that they give to us, that they wrote, and I think it's appropriate, if you don't want to sign the proclamation and you want to make changes, that you tonight discuss those changes, and then you send it to them and say, are you okay with these? Because it's more of us joining with everybody else and sort of celebrating the adoption of fair housing laws. So that's what the proclamation does, is it says we celebrate the adoption of fair housing laws.
Right. It's not a legislative matter.
No.
It's just it's a proclamation. It's not a letter. It's not a communication. It's a statement.
I'm fine with the letter the way it is. So,
Councilmember Candell, do you have anything further?
Having heard that, I would agree with Councilmember Way that there's a bigger issue here, but the letter is not the issue. That we sign the letter and then address, the issue of the, whether we want to tackle rent stabilization and that whole issue, but it's separate from this letter.
Anyone else? Well, I'll just offer my 2 cents. This is a proclamation. It's not a letter. It's not a resolution. It's not a legislative act. It's a standard thing that we as a city do along with cities throughout the country. That's not to say that the issues that have been raised with respect to economic issues aren't important and don't deserve separate consideration. But I think the best path forward is to adopt the proclamation tonight and reserve opportunities to consider these other issues at a later date. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the City of Larkspur Fair Housing Proclamation?
I'll move the consent calendar 4.1 approval.
I have a second.
Or is it 4.3?
I think it was 4.3, yeah.
4.3, pardon. So I'll amend that to 4.3.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. Yeah, second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Candell,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Way,
Yes.
Mayor Hara.
Yes. And with that, we will come back to our regular calendar. And I think we are now back on to 8.1, which is an update on city activities and finances with regard to the coronavirus, hopefully diminishing pandemic. So
I
city
don't
manager.
have many items for you. As I noted, parklets remain a hot topic, and so we're going to hold a workshop both in person and online so that the public can start to give us feedback on what they like and don't like, because that's going to be one of the legacies of the pandemic. It's the explosion of parklets around Larkspur and the country, really. The other thing is we're still waiting for guidelines from the federal government so we can better understand how to qualify for the stimulus money that has been allocated for Larkspur. And we haven't yet seen that. So we're hoping that we're going to get some clarity here soon, because we'd like to put that money to work once it's made available to us. And then lastly, I anticipate that in the next 2 days, we'll start to get briefings from Dr. Willis and his staff about what the governor's announcement for June means, that we'll be potentially leaving the tier system. So I hope that at your next council meeting, I'll be able to report more on implications for the city. And then lastly, we do anticipate beginning to allow people into the library and into the second floor to engage planning and building staff on an appointment basis beginning in May. And we'll have more information on our website about the start date for that. We'll be using a software product to allow people to book appointments. So more to follow on that.
Just on that last item, Dan, I mean, I know we live in a community where everybody has access to computer resources, but is there any other option to making reservations online?
People can always pick up the phone and call the staff, and the staff can do it for them.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, any other comments on agenda item 8.1? Anyone from the public would like to offer a comment?
We have caller ending in 1402 for public comment.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm delighted to hear about the possibility of the City Hall reopening. And my question would be, will the copy machine be restored for public use? Because that is about the only remaining copy machine that's accessible to a lot of people, and it would be wonderful to have it back. Thank you.
I don't have an answer at this time, Mr. Mayor, but I'm aware of Mr. Holmes' interest in the copier being restored.
Yeah, okay, good. We'll work on it. With that, I think we can conclude this item and move to our final item, 9, which is adjournment. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I was waiting there. I thought maybe you want to
I'll
just keep
second.
going.
I'm having fun. We can hang out here all night.
Okay, I think we have a consensus to adjourn, and with that, the meeting tonight is adjourned.
Have a good night, everybody.
Night.